Buckle up, because we're going deep into South African politics today. We're going to trace the journey of Floyd Shivambu, the prominent EFF figure.
Yeah.
But his story goes way back even before that, and lately, it's taken some really interesting twists and turns. We'll be looking at some excerpts from pasted text to sort of map out his path, from the ANC Youth League all the way to his current spot in the MK party.
It's definitely a journey that has caught a lot of people's attention, that's for sure. I mean, his commitment to economic and social justice has always been there. But the way he goes about it, it's evolved over time, and it's led him to some, well, let's just say unexpected alliances.
Exactly, and that's what we're going to dig into. What's motivating this guy? What does his vision for the MK party actually mean for South Africa's future?
Yeah.
Let's rewind back to his early days in Malamulele, Limpopo, an area, that's had its share of socioeconomic problems. How did that environment growing up shape his political views?
Well, put yourself in his shoes for a second. Imagine seeing poverty and lack of opportunity up close and personal every single day. That was Shivambu's reality. Growing up like that, it's no wonder he developed such a strong passion for social justice, a desire to challenge the systems that he saw holding back Black South Africans.
So he was already questioning things like the way things were from a very young age.
Oh, yeah.
And that continued into his time at the University of Witwatersrand. Tell me about his student activism there.
Well, at the university, he was a huge advocate for students who were marginalized, pushing for better access to education, calling out policies that he thought were unfair, and it really foreshadows the Shivambu we see today. He's never been shy about speaking his mind and challenging authority, even if it ruffles some feathers.
So those early years really laid the groundwork for his move into formal politics with the ANC Youth League. What was he hoping to accomplish during that time?
He found common ground with another up-and-comer in the ANCYL, Julius Malema. Both of them, they really believed in this idea of radical economic transformation, especially for young Black South Africans. And they saw policies like land redistribution as a key piece of that puzzle.
But they weren't just, talking about change. They were known for their really passionate speeches and for directly challenging the ANC's leadership, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. They were very vocal, demanding more drastic action, which, caused some friction within the ANC. Yeah. And it eventually led to them leaving the ANCYL, a pretty pivotal moment in South African politics, I'd say.
Yeah, and then things got really interesting in 2013 with the birth of the EFF. What role did Shivambu play in shaping this brand new party?
Well, as deputy president, he was a major force in defining the EFF's core principles. Economic freedom, land redistribution, and tackling what they saw as the unfinished work of dismantling apartheid's legacy.
And he didn't shy away from bringing those issues front and center in Parliament.
Yeah.
His speeches were bold, even confrontational at times, right?
Oh, he definitely made his presence known. He became the strong voice for the EFF's agenda, wasn't afraid of heated debates, and challenged established figures head-on.
But there were also rumblings of tension within the EFF itself. What caused those cracks to start showing?
The EFF had some pretty lofty goals, but achieving them within the existing political system proved to be, well, a challenge. Some reports suggest that Shivambu got frustrated with the pace of change, like the party was drifting from its initial revolutionary goals.
And that dissatisfaction leads us to the next chapter, his unexpected move to the MK party. This is a group with roots in the ANC's military wing. What was it about them that appealed to him?
It's definitely a move that has people scratching their heads trying to understand it. You have to remember the EFF operates within a democratic framework. The MK party leans more towards direct action and economic self-sufficiency. So Shivambu might see this as a more effective path to bring about the kind of radical transformation he envisions.
It's a bold move, no doubt about it. Especially when you consider the MK party's history,
Yeah.
And his rise within the party has been, well, meteoric. To go from national organizer to secretary general in just a few months.
That's lightning fast. Yeah, that quick ascent shows how much confidence the MK party has in him. They clearly see him as someone who can bring in a younger generation of activists, inject some fresh energy and new ideas into their movement.
But perhaps the most controversial aspect of this whole thing is Shivambu's vocal support for former President Jacob Zuma. This seems to contradict his earlier critiques of the ANC leadership. What's the story there?
It's complicated. To say the least, Shivambu argues that Zuma was a misunderstood leader, someone who was genuinely dedicated to economic transformation. But his efforts were, kind of stifled by all those internal ANC conflicts.
That's a pretty big claim to make, especially with all those accusations of corruption during Zuma's presidency. How does Shivambu reconcile that with his defense of Zuma?
It's definitely a point of contention, no doubt about it. Shivambu acknowledges the controversies, but insists that Zuma embodies the true spirit of the liberation struggle, those values that he feels the ANC has kind of abandoned.
So, by aligning himself with Zuma, is Shivambu trying to position the MK party as the true successor to the ANC's original vision?
Absolutely. He's presenting the MK party as the authentic voice of the people, the ones carrying the torch of the liberation struggle forward.
That's a powerful statement to make, especially given how politically charged things are in South Africa. We'll have to unpack that a bit more. But before we do, I'm curious, what jumps out at you so far in Shivambu's story?
What I find fascinating is how Shivambu is weaving together the past and the present. He's drawing on the MK party's history, their fight against apartheid, and trying to reframe it to address the challenges of today.
It's like he's rewriting the narrative, reclaiming those original ANC values, and applying them to today's socioeconomic landscape.
Exactly. He sees the MK party as the vehicle to achieve that radical change that he feels the ANC just hasn't delivered on. It's about reigniting the spirit of that liberation struggle to tackle issues like inequality and land reform head on.
But it's not just about looking back, right? It's about making real change happen right now.
Yeah.
So what are Shivambu's specific goals for the MK party? What's he actually planning to do?
Well, he's got a pretty ambitious agenda.
Oh.
Absolutely. Modernizing the party is right up there, that's for sure. Attracting younger members, updating their strategies, building a wider coalition of activists who share that vision for radical change.
So it's more than just a political party. He's trying to build a movement.
You got that. That's exactly it. He wants to engage this whole new generation of South Africans who are, disillusioned with the current political system. He's tapping into that frustration and saying, hey, here's a more direct way to get to that social and economic justice we all want.
And land redistribution, that's still a big part of his vision, right?
Yeah. It's absolutely fundamental to the MK party's platform. He believes that owning land is the basis of economic empowerment for people. He sees how land is distributed right now as, a direct result of colonial injustice. And he thinks it needs to be, fixed, made right.
I think nationalization of resources is another big one he's pushing for.
You're right on the money. He argues that South Africa's natural resources should benefit all its citizens, not just a small elite group. Nationalization, for him, is a way to make sure that the wealth generated from these resources actually goes towards uplifting communities and tackling poverty.
These are some bold ideas, no doubt about it. And they're likely to get pushback, both from within the political establishment and from folks who see these policies as going too far.
Oh, yeah, for sure. He's definitely a disruptor, Shivambu. He's challenging the status quo, and that always creates friction, especially in a political landscape that's already pretty volatile.
So what's the public's reaction been like to his move to the MK party? It must be pretty divided.
It's a mixed bag, that's for sure. Some people see him as a brave leader, someone who's willing to take risks, to go against the grain. They really admire his commitment to his ideals,
And what about the folks who aren't so thrilled with his choice? What are their concerns?
The critics worry that his stance is too radical, that it might alienate those moderate voters. And some see his support for Zuma, given the corruption allegations, as kind of contradicting his earlier principles.
So it sounds like Shivambu's walking a tightrope here. He needs to keep his base, those who truly believe in his vision. But he also needs to broaden his appeal if he wants to have a real impact on South African politics.
Yeah, that's the challenge, trying to balance those competing pressures while still staying true to his core beliefs. It's a tough act.
What are the biggest obstacles he might face trying to make his vision for the MK party a reality? Where are the challenges?
Well, internally, he's got to unify the party. They're bound to have their own internal divisions, right? So, bringing together the different factions, reconciling different viewpoints within the MK party itself, that's going to be a key first step.
And then there's the whole broader political scene to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. He's going to have to navigate this complex web of political alliances and rivalries, and to really create change, he might even need to build bridges with other parties or movements that share some of his goals.
And let's not forget the economic realities, right? Putting policies like land redistribution and nationalization into action, that takes careful planning and execution. There could be some serious economic fallout that he'll have to address.
That's a crucial point. He needs to show that his vision isn't just ideological, but it's actually economically viable. He's got to present concrete plans and address those concerns about potential economic instability, right? How do you redistribute land fairly and efficiently? How do you nationalize resources without throwing the markets into chaos? Those are the questions he's going to have to answer.
So The stakes seem pretty high for Shivambu and the MK party. Where does he go from here? What's the next chapter in this story?
It's tough to say for sure, but one thing's clear. Shivambu is a force to be reckoned with in South African politics. He's a disruptor, not afraid to shake things up and fight for what he believes in. Whether he can actually make his vision for the MK party a reality, that remains to be seen, but it's definitely a story worth watching, that's for sure.
He's a fascinating figure, someone who really sparks debate and pushes those boundaries. His journey really shows just how dynamic and complex South African politics can be. Now let's zoom out a little bit and think about the bigger picture. If Shivambu does manage to rally support for the MK party and its agenda, how could this change the political landscape in South Africa? What's the potential impact?
That's the question that's got a lot of political analysts scratching their heads. If the MK party gains real momentum, it could seriously disrupt the balance of power. The ANC has dominated the political scene since apartheid ended, but it could be facing a major challenge from a party that's tapping into this growing wave of dissatisfaction, especially among those younger voters. You've got a younger generation that's tired of waiting for change, looking for leaders who speak to their values, their hopes.
It sounds like a generational shift might be brewing, and Shivambu is positioned to ride that wave.
Yeah, exactly. He's not talking about just tinkering with policies. He's talking about a fundamental change in how South Africa is run, how its resources are shared. It's a message that resonates with people who feel like they've been left behind by the current system, who believe that the promise of a truly equal and just society just hasn't been delivered yet. And it's a powerful message, especially for those who feel like their voices aren't being heard.
But let's be realistic here. He's going to hit some roadblocks. Right? The political establishment isn't going to give up power easily. And there's going to be pushback against those radical changes he's proposing. It's not going to be a walk in the park.
Oh, absolutely. He's got a tough road ahead, no doubt about it. Think about the internal party politics he's got to manage, the strategic alliances he needs to build, and then there are those concerns about the economic impact of his policies that he has to address. And most importantly, he needs to convince enough South Africans that his vision for the future is the right one. The one worth fighting for.
So, in the end, is Floyd Shivambu a radical visionary, or is he more of a political maverick? Will he go down in history as the guy who reshaped South Africa, or will his vision kind of fade away?
That's the big question, right? The one everyone wants answered. Only time will tell, I guess. But one thing's for sure, Floyd Shivambu, he's not someone you can ignore. He's going to challenge the way things are, push for a different future for South Africa, and you know what? Whether you agree with how he does it or his beliefs, you can't deny the guy is a force to be reckoned with.
His story's definitely got you hooked. It's all about ambition, ideology, this constant drive for what he sees as a more just and fair society. And the thing is, the story's not over yet. We saw him go from the ANC Youth League to the EFF and now the MK party. Each move driven by that vision of his, that need for change.
And it just highlights how much is going on in South African politics, how complex it all is. You can see those core beliefs of his. They run through his whole career. He's always adapting, coming up with new strategies, fighting for what he believes in.
And that brings us to the question for you, our listener. Is Shivambu a visionary, a radical, or is he more of a political maverick? Will he be the one who changes South Africa, or will his ideas just sort of fade away?
That's something to really think about, and we hope you'll keep talking about it, keep debating it. The future is not set in stone. It's shaped by the choices we make, the actions we take, even the conversations we have. And Floyd Shivambu's story, it reminds us that even when things seem impossible, one person's vision, their determination, can make a difference, can change history in ways we never expected.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the heart of South African politics. We hope this episode gave you some insights into Floyd Shivambu's journey and what's happening in South Africa today. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep that conversation going.